Hi everyone. Hi friends.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm glad you could join me to talk about ourselves. Just kidding. We are here to talk about Geeks Out on the 12th anniversary of our founding. To those joining us, I'm here with the co-founders, Joey Stern and Josh Siegel. How's it going?
I'm gonna really enjoy Josh getting any attention, which is how like when he's his least comfortable.
Josh has a
You
professorly
know me
vibe.
well. Yeah.
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 It's going well.
Nice. So this year at Geeks Out, we are doing a lot of things, bigger and better. FlameCon is back for its 10th year, but I wanted to take this conversation back a couple years before then. In officially, we celebrate our birthday in April of 2012, or I guess now our founding in April 2012. So yeah, I guess let's talk about that.
I'm sorry, are we not dynamic enough for you? Is it not
I can't get a word out.
Geeks Out started based off a post New York Comic Con chat. At the time, and this is for all you Gen Alpha gays, queer people, this was at a time when there was one gay panel at New York Comic Con, a convention of 100,000 people, and they put every gay person they knew into one panel. So it was like 16 gay people up on a stage, and then you'd have someone like Phil Jimenez answering questions about Marvel, and then I forget his name, but this like one indie artist. It was entirely male. There may have been one woman on it,
Do you
but
remember?
like
Hold on, back up.
Did-
Do you remember what the panel was at New York Comic Con?
it was literally called, I believe, "Gays in Comics."
Yeah.
Okay, right to the
it
point.
Yeah.
was
Representation
Yeah.
matters.
right, and so it'd be like this moderator would be like, "So you make comics and
Mhm.
you're gay," and then they'd be like, "I
Yeah.
am."
Yeah. I think it was sort of the Queers in Comics panel that happens at San Diego every year. It was I think it was the same people doing that kind of thing, where it was just like queer storytelling, people telling their careers and personal notes and stuff, and it was very, it was a level one discussion of queer comics content. It was really just, it was a showcase of queer talent.
Yeah,
But it
but
didn't
like
have a real topic or anything. And but there wasn't, but we knew everyone would be there. And so at the end of the panel, Joey stands up and says, "We're having a big party. Everybody should come."
Did
and
you
and that's
know,
sort of
Josh?
the
Did you
beginning
know
of Geeks
Joey
Out.
at that point?
Hmm?
Did you know Joey at that point?
no, that was
We
year two.
barely met. No, that was year one,
No, because
right?
we hadn't even
Wasn't
had
it?
the idea. Year one is when I met you. Year two is when I stood up in front of that panel and said, "We're having a party," because that's when we had Snicked. Because
Okay.
remember, because
No,
for Geeks
we
Out when
had
it
like a
first started,
meetup. Oh, but you're right. Well, no, we
yeah,
had
we had
no.
a meetup.
I think year one we had a meetup. You and I had been friends for a little while, and we were like, "There's a queer." That we had a sense that there was a queer thing that could happen among the people we knew and their friends, who all just seemed to love geeky stuff, but had no,
Oh
official
man,
community or anything.
Okay, hold on.
So
So I'm gonna back us
this
up
is all
just to do.
terrible.
Yeah,
But
I
I'm gonna do some
wait
stage setting
because
here.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
beforehand, I remember Josh
Can,
is
can we
we
get
went
it
to a
straight though? Like
panel.
what?
We
Hmm?
went to a panel. I met
Uh-huh.
you. I had met you before at
A
that awkward
party.
Halloween party,
Yeah,
Was that
yeah.
like
and then after
2010?
the panel, we were
It was like
talking.
28.
Yeah, 22,
We had
and we met in 2008, and this is 2009. In
Got
2010 is when we have our first booth. And so in 2009, Josh and I go to this big giant panel. There's only one gay thing, and we talk shit about it with a
we don't talk shit about
person.
it. We're happy
We
to be there. We
we
just
are
realized that
happy, but
there
there
was,
is
but
that panel was a. It was all of these people are so talented, but like it
hmm,
is so impossible to have a panel of just gay people where you're like, hey, you write for a major comic publisher, you write for your blog, you are a cartoonist, you're a like videographer, and then
cosplayer
you're
or
all
something.
gay. Talk
Yeah,
about it. Yeah. Oh, and
a
a
topic. Yeah.
cosplayer.
Is it impossible to talk about because we all talk over each other?
It's impossible to talk about because every person who got up and then asked a question would be like, Phil Jimenez, I have one question for you. And then they'd be like, and cosplayer, do you have anything to say about representation of orcs in media? Like, it's so many. So Josh and I got together and
It's been a long time, so you kind of like,
we went
our
to that burger
memories of it
place.
being made differ because
We
we've
went to that
grown to
burger
be
place out
different
there.
people.
Yeah.
Um,
We went to that
so
burger place and kept talking,
Wait,
and you were like, we should do something. And I was like, we should
yeah,
totally do something, expecting to never, ever do anything. And then Josh sent an email 2 days later. He was like, I registered that domain. Let's make it happen.
yeah.
And we
But,
started meeting
but
up. We called our friends, and then we threw our first fundraiser with to get a booth at New York Comic Con next year, so we'd actually have gay representation. And our goal was get enough money to get a booth in one of their setups, and get enough money to also throw a panel discussion, right? So we'd have more than one panel. And Josh, over the course of that year, yeah, we submitted like 6 panels. We got like 2 accepted. We were able to make a booth happen. We had Josh, I think, and I worked ourselves half to death that first convention because we would show up at like every day that it would open. Then you'd hang out standing in that booth on a carpet that questionable carpet that we had purchased, but we
a
used for
pink
three
shag
years.
rug. Yeah,
Oh, it was
it was
great.
disgusting, but it was great.
It
Yeah,
we have
was
never we wow, okay, so the first year we went big because we have never purchased carpet since then.
yeah.
Oh, I
It
believe
was
we got
important to
that
me.
all right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think I
it was
made
great.
Keith drive to the Bronx to get it or something terrible. Um, but I was very emphatic about that pink carpet. I knew it
But
was going to make the
every
entire.
year
It was,
throughout
it was before
convention,
people
we'd be
really
like,
did
"We're
big
gonna."
Oh wait,
activations
wait,
like
hold
that.
on, hold on, hold on,
So,
hold on.
Sorry.
yeah,
This is like wrangling chatty cats.
yeah. All right,
Um
I love that. There was that pink carpet. I think
we should have given it a
represented
name.
represented the Geeks Out aesthetic as far as I was concerned. Like, here's this thing that's pretty beautiful from far away,
Mhm.
and as you get closer, it's a little dirty. And each convention, you're like, you're definitely going to throw this out this time. And then the convention would end, and we'd be like, well, let's keep it.
Just give it a shake. It's fine. It's fine. No,
It wasn't
yeah,
until
it
we had,
eventually went away, but
yeah, I
it was
think we
great.
eventually just had enough volunteers who were like, weren't there for the initial pink carpeting, and they were
Mhm.
like, do I have to stand on this? We'd be like, oh, I guess no.
well, that you know what that makes a lot of sense in the grand tradition of Geeks Out. So I remember meeting you guys at that very first table in 2010. At the time, I was a librarian, and I was like, oh, none of my queer friends read comics, and none of my comics friends are queer. They're all straight dudes. And then I remember walking up to this booth, and Joey, you were in a pink cape, but your back was to the front of the table, and I like kind of like quietly tiptoed up and you whipped around and you're like, hi, join us. Um
That sounds about right.
yeah. And I was like,
100%
love
fair.
the energy.
That was
Uh
that was the year. That was also the year where we discovered we had made stickers that said "Geeks Out thinks I'm hot" because we
Mhm.
were like, we'll hand these out to queer people. But you know
That's
what
great. And we
children
would
love?
stick them on people if they were hot in a way that
Yeah.
was maybe not, we hadn't had consent conversations yet. It was early in our saga.
we would
So
my
we put
strategy
stickers on people. Yeah, no.
my strategy was to go, "Hey, girl, hey," and if they turned around, I'd go, "We think you're hot,"
Mm.
and then I'd give them a sticker. But then we kept having like children run up and grab a bunch of stickers because we're like a brightly colored booth and they can't read.
it's love rainbows.
Yeah, and that's
Mm.
why it became Geeks Out thinks I'm cool. Became the next one for next year.
Yeah. Or wasn't it Geeks Out
Fierce.
thinks I'm fierce?
Fierce,
Yeah.
Yeah.
fierce.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
remember, I mean, even before that, we did like 6 events from like 2009 to 2010 to raise the money. It wasn't even like that much. It was like $800, but at the time, like that was a lot.
We
Like
had no money.
we had no money. We had nothing to do. Like we did a fundraiser where we just did an auction of like we would reach out to a bunch of artists. We got people to donate things from like DC and Marvel to
Yeah.
like
We got
sell to our
tremendous stuff.
friends. Yeah,
Allison
Josh.
Bechtel donated artwork. We
yeah.
got tremendous stuff from people like all over the map. All these creators gave us beautiful artwork and books and things to auction off, and
I mean,
uh, yeah,
In
and that's
those
what got us to the con. It was awesome.
The thing
In
that I
those
think you
early
don't
days, wait, hold
remember,
on, Joey, hold on one second.
yeah. Mhm.
Josh, in
Hmm.
those early days, what was the reaction of people when you were reaching out trying to describe what a Geeks Out is and why you were asking them for things like art?
It was something that kept evolving, and it was a little confusing because we were like, it was also in kind of the shadow of the Me Too movement. No, not sorry, the It Gets Better movement, uh, and so people were really. Um, it was a big deal for people to make places for safe queer kids, and to just talk about that experience. And so that was a that was a major, um, I don't want to say selling point, but like we talked about that a lot as like a place where queer youth at the Comic Con would see themselves welcomed and feel okay. Um, but we also we're having conversations with people who were more interested in the community and the nightlife aspects that we were kind of growing, and the fact that we wanted to have discussions at New York Comic Con, and um, I feel like we were trying to we're trying to do so many things. We It was hard to sum up what Geeks Out was really about, and then afterward, I feel like we didn't until we did it, and then like a week later, got to step back and be like, oh wow, all these things that we'd been kind of experimenting with putting together for New York Comic Con um, really worked together, and we grew the org so quickly, uh, uh, just by making fun making fun events, making places that were experiences that were welcoming for people to come out and meet other geeks.
Joey,
Well, and
do
I
you
think
remember one of those first events?
I, I think the thing that maybe like you it's hard to explain to maybe somebody who's living in 2024, but like in 2010, gay people and geekdom were actually not connected the way they are. Like geekdom itself was filled with gay
Mhm.
people going to events that were for straight people, or like existing in spaces where they weren't acknowledged, right? Like we had like three gay
Mhm.
superheroes at that point, even in the comics. Marvel didn't exist as a wide scale thing. Like there wasn't, like, I think the Arrow had just come out and there was like a gay character on that. I knew so
And
many gay people who liked comics, but not any gay people who liked comics and talked to each other. And the world of comics itself had like, yeah, there were indie comics that had gay representation, and then mainstream comics just had barely anything, right? And so, like, when we started doing events, what was mostly surprising to me, um, we did one at this bar called Vlada, that had like an ice luge and mostly a twink population. And we got the upstairs, which was great because they didn't charge us and it was very nice of them. But the entryway felt like a gauntlet of people who bullied me in high school, kind of. And then you get upstairs to like geek paradise. And I just remember like every time someone would come through and be like, "Is this Geeks Out?" Like, are you like it was like a secret because they'd have to go past this like long bar of people who like fashionable folks and other sorts of types, and then get upstairs and the music is different. The folks are talking to each other. We did that one party in Brooklyn towards Christmas where the DJ played video game music, and we found that there were limits to what we would consider um, listening to for several hours. But like it was those initial events. The thing that was really cool was it was like the first really like gay space that I would say was really queer to me, because we got women and a variety of kinds of gay men, and non-binary people were starting to exist. I'm sure they existed before, but like getting a lot of kinds of genders who were queer folks in the same space in a bar night that wasn't like, this is jock sex mule night or whatever. Like it was like, here are people who are interested. And John was with us pretty early on, and I like remember meeting him. I forget at which event, but just like finding someone who was so fascinating and knew uh, an incredible amount of in-depth knowledge and could draw and talk about all the aspects of this stuff as being integrated, you know, it was just cool. And I was, like
Mhm.
meeting a lot of people who have become really close friends of mine, in a space that, like, I've always been very
Mhm.
handsome. And so I've always felt comfortable in lots of gay spaces. But like this was the first one where, like, at the end of every Geeks Out party, I felt like I had 6 new friends,
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting that you mentioned the sort of hostility in gay spaces, or
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
toward,
And
or just that kind of faction between the geeky queers and everyone else, or just like, the, or yeah, because I even remember booking, trying to book one of our early events, probably around 2012 ish, and going to a bar. I'm going to be nice and not mention it, but it's fine. They don't exist anymore. But walking in and being like, yeah, I'm with this organization. We do events, blah blah. And then it was a bar in the village, and the manager. I asked to speak to the manager in a nice way, and he comes up to me. He like looks me up and down, and he goes, "And do you have decision making power?" And it was very much like, "Is your husband okay with this?" And this was, and I mean, granted, like I'm not going to make excuses, but like there was already that hostility there. I think in a broad sense, it for the like non-traditional handsome cis man,
Mhm.
right.
but I also remember those spaces being really inhospitable toward femmes and thems. And that was also doubly true in conventions. I mean, I remember that
Yeah.
first year there was an Arizona iced tea ad campaign that said like,
Mhm.
"I like big cans." And that was even, those were the years before we even had
Yeah.
the conversations around like cosplay is not consent. And that's
Yeah.
actually that, like, yeah, it's not that long
I
ago, and it
feel
feels like a lifetime.
Yeah. I feel like the landscape that we started Geeks Out in was one that there was a lot of hostility in fan culture at conventions. I never really felt that safe being out at Comic Cons, like in a way, like it just seemed there's like this kind of misanthropic kind of vibe among the comics community, people sometimes, and like it really, it it needed to be uh, I don't know, changed.
I
The
just,
standards of sociability and friendliness to queer people needed to be changed, and
well,
I think the way that we put ourselves in there on our own and made a really welcoming experience for so many people, I think that just sent a big signal all over, and like I, we stopped hearing a lot about Comic Cons not taking the side of queer people who had been, you know, not necessarily assaulted, but like wronged because they were queer in a fan space. And like conventions really, I feel like they changed over the course of our org.
and even like I would say, and I think if Geeks Out and FlameCon had one true believer in the beginning, it was Josh. Like, you really were like, this is valuable, this is important, because you had been to more of those conventions than I had, um, and like had experience within the creation side of things, right? And so like I, it was the way in which the conversations would change as we, it was so hard with so many events to get to Comic Con. And then after that first year, it felt like so much easier because we knew what we were doing. We had established something. We had made enough in terms of donations to get and pay for the next year. And that, like, for year two, let us focus on community building and talking to
Yeah.
folks and having conversations. And so, like, it was wild to like we went to this gay convention, um, that like uh, was a gay convention, like for gays only. Like there were women there, but like the whole setup was so. Um, one of our female uh, board members like came with me, and like my experience of it was like, this is like so cute and they're so nice. This is like before I was non-binary, um, and like uh, her experience was like, uh, I'm not welcome here. Like this is, and it was eye-opening to sort of see, as we gain notoriety and developed connections, getting to push back on folks, right? To say like, actually, we have experience with this. We run these
Yeah.
conventions. We know who these people are. Like the year that like I think we got free tickets to a Marvel movie for the first time, or some movie. And I remember like having a conversation with the PR person who put it and was like, hey, just so you know, we don't want to go to this if it's insulting. Like, can you make sure that that's not the case? And it was the first time that someone had asked her that. And she was like, I don't think it is. Let me check. And then like
Hmm.
came back and was like, yeah, I think you guys should be fine. But
Hmm.
it, it felt like being part of an industry waking up to the idea that they didn't just have one fan and everybody else was a jerk, right? Like now you go to New York Comic Con
Hmm.
and there are so many gay kinds of panels. There are so many breakouts of these. And, great. And then you
Hmm.
have like even more niche content being created. Like, you know, X-Men 97 is the gayest X-Men that I've seen on the screen so far. And I know it can get gayer. And
I wanna touch for a minute on you mentioning like the pushback that started to come together and like have ears in those early years. I actually don't know how this came to be, but there was an early campaign, Stop Ender's Game.
yes,
And
Yeah.
I remember seeing that made like Entertainment Weekly at the time. And I remember thinking and saying like, "Oh my gosh, this is like this organization is too cool.
Yeah.
They're in a magazine."
Yeah.
How did
It,
that idea come together?
well, it
it was.
we felt as geeks, like we saw the movie coming out, and we knew so many people loved the book. It was really so important to so many people, and it wasn't known to everyone and how terrible Orson Scott Card was, and how much of his time and fortune he was probably giving to uh, organizations that were actively working against the rights of queer people. Um,
And at the time, we
so
didn't
we
even
just
have gay
wanted to,
marriage.
yeah,
Like,
and so we, yeah, and it was interesting. Like the language we chose was to be really just clear about that message. It's about him and it's about the money. And we just kind of stuck with it. And then we provided, and on opening night for Ender's Game, we threw screenings all over the country in little mini Geeks Out chapters in like a whole bunch of states to have a screening party. A lot of people watched The Fifth Element. I forget what else people watched, just like fun movies that had like queer vibes that everyone could like. And um, I think in the end, like the Ender's Game movie franchise was kind of poison because of Orson Scott Card, and like
no,
I think I felt like we were successful in doing something, and it was cool to do, and it felt really good to stand up as a geek to be like, you know what, this cultural moment for us is significant as a group. We have a presence, and if if we can shape the media that we want to consume from I think we can do it if we organize.
and that we're big enough to make an impact. Like, being in a
Mhm.
magazine, uh, like it was so massive to have a sense of like, oh, there's enough of us out there to make a big enough stink to have this multi million-dollar movie with a crazy marketing budget have to have some kind of response to this, because I think they wouldn't have said anything,
Mhm.
right? I think they would have been like, this is a non-issue. You don't have to know about the politics of the person we're giving money to. And it's not like the Ender's Game was then like a series of like, there was not just one movie that was going to come out, right? And so to get to a point where we were giving quotes, which is crazy, but also like to have a sense that like there is a dialogue enough that like people involved in this have to differentiate themselves. And at the time, like I just remember like, gay marriage wasn't legal. We had just lost in California in 2008. Like it was so frustrating to see that, like, here is I want this to be a financially impactful decision. And so many of the reviews, what was great and what was fun, was so many of the reviews would be like there are people who are boycotting it, but don't worry, that content isn't on the screen. And I was like, it's such a win that you have to acknowledge
Hmm.
that there are people who are mad about this. Like, you
Yeah.
wouldn't have said anything, Kansas City Observer, if it wasn't big enough that somebody had some sense of this being a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said, just that realization that there's enough of us out there was really important. And there's a lot of like right time, right place that I think Geeks Out was able to capitalize on that right,
Hmm.
because we weren't the only queer group in that space trying to do that work. But and to kind of go back to that time, so 2008 to 2010, I mean,
Hmm.
Blogger kind of existed. Like I remember being in library school and they were all like Web 2.0, you can post stuff on the internet and then people can read your content. Like that was still novel. Twitter was only that I mean, if you guys met in 2008, that was the same year that Twitter started. So like
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of the things that we take for granted, the connections that we take for granted now is like, oh yeah, I can tweet at
Hmm.
Marvel and like get the ear of somebody who works there. Like that was not necessarily the case. So, um, yeah. So okay, fast forwarding a little bit, 2014, I believe, is when this brain trust here had the idea for a wee convention, putting all the queers. It wasn't just enough, it seems, to have one panel about gay stuff. Uh, tell what
Not
were
enough at all.
the so as
No,
gluttons for
we need
punishment.
about 30 to 40 panels for a weekend. How about that?
And
Let's do that. How about
I
30?
remember
Who was
talking
the
to
first
Josh.
hold on, who was the first person to say, and I think I know who, let's do an entire convention? Josh?
Probably me. Probably me. I mean, there had been one in LA that you went
Mm.
to, the gay one that, you
Was that
know,
BentCon?
like,
Hmm.
yeah, and everybody loved BenCon. It sounded real fun. I wish I went, but
They had a
it had
mermaid
some
pool
challenges.
party.
Yeah, I mean, it was what it was, but
Yeah.
like the notion of a queer Comic Con, like I feel like that put it in my head. And within a year or two of Geeks Out, we were making a lot of connections in all over the city in these places to host events, um, and it really seemed like the thing that we could do. And like at first, we were thinking about doing it in the LGBT center, I think, but just the scale of what we wanted to do was just a little too much to do there. But we could, just if we started just work like thinking about how we could do it and yeah, and
This
by
was,
year 3 or 4, we kind of committed to doing something, and I
well,
I, for,
we,
I forget it was a slow thing. Like we had the idea for a while,
Hmm.
and just I wouldn't let it. I knew if we didn't do it, someone else would. So like,
well, when we
it,
had, you have to remember
we got to.
Gamer X happened, right?
Hmm.
Gamer X raised
Mm,
$100,000 on Kickstarter.
mm.
And at the
That was
Was that
time,
the
before
yeah,
us.
was that
that was
before?
before us.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mm,
interesting. Okay.
Um, I think, I believe so. Maybe they did it after us. I don't know.
I don't
But
recall.
what I remember is it was like a conversation between our board, and I remember my proposal was like, I bet we can get 130 people into
Mhm.
into a small room at the LGBTQ center for
Mhm.
like 6 hours, and that can be our convention. And you and John were like, no, we can get
Yeah,
so many more. We can get 400
yeah.
people, and that's going to be crazy. And it was like 400 people is an insane number. And then our first convention was like we got to 1,000, I believe, over the course. And we did a Kickstarter
Oh,
to raise
wow.
money for it. We
Easily.
budgeted it for like $10,000, and then we sold tickets. We sold out of tables. We had we did it in what I believe is no longer exists, but essentially a spooky mansion.
It's probably
With
condos. The Grand Prospect Hall.
like, oh,
I
Okay.
think they kept the facade and then just hollowed it out. They did a
yeah.
domino factory on it.
And it was like, I mean, the it was so far beyond. I mean, all of this has been far beyond anything I could have imagined it to be. But like, I remember thinking about how crazy you sounded To me, it being like 400 people, I think we can do it. We can make a weekend. And then when we blew past that, I was like, Josh
Well,
is a magician.
I
like
have to
running
say,
running the parties that we ran for a few years, it became clear that if you had a good idea and you had the right people kind of talking about it, like you can like we had the momentum. I think if we tried to do FlameCon like year one or something, doing a much less ambitious version of it would have made sense. Um, but by the time we started doing it, we had already been doing all these pretty ambitious events every month for years. And it was just like, you know what? I really just felt it. You know, it's like, we really are at this level, even though we don't know what the heck we're doing. I think we can pull this off. And it
Did
was,
we have it? Was
it
it two
was
days the
great.
first year, or was it
no, it
one?
was one day.
Just one day,
One, because
In
that night
2015.
we turned the, I remember that because that was when we the end of the night came and we had a 2 hour turnaround time to make the Grand Convention Hall into a party room where we had partnered with a stripper, I believe,
And
um,
a porn company.
and a
Oh
porn
yeah.
company.
Yeah.
That's right. And they provided us with
Free porn.
several no, they provided us with like several porn stars who could dance, who were incredible. And then we also had drag queens, and it was
Mhm.
uh yeah,
It was
that was
awesome.
it was
Yeah.
It was a
amazing.
logistical nightmare.
It
Uh,
was
It was a
I
logistical nightmare,
I
I
but
have to
never
it was a
admit,
lot of fun.
when
Yeah.
I when I
never
when
remember
I
the stress.
guessed guessed who had the crazy idea, Josh, I'm sorry, I thought it was Joey.
Really?
Uh, I
Oh.
think it's because
You
he delivers things with such gravitas and chill.
Mm.
And Joey's usually the one that's like, "What if we bought a yacht?" Um,
Yeah. The key is convincing Joey that he wants to buy a yacht. And so
oh,
that's usually
wait,
my
hold
role,
on.
be like, "Joey, the right idea would be,
I'm
a
suddenly
giant ridiculous convention."
understanding
yeah.
I'm suddenly understanding this dynamic between the two of you in a way that I don't think I ever have.
Oh,
Um,
really?
Josh
No,
is
look,
Josh is pulling the puppet strings in a way that I
Ah,
wow.
I
no,
always
look,
thought that was obvious.
You just gotta convince Joey.
I ended our first meeting at Island Burger with like essentially like Josh was like, we should make a group that does this. We should get a booth there next year at Comic Con and have things. And I was like, absolutely. I'm never doing any of that. And then like 2 days later, I've registered a domain. I have an idea for a website. And why don't I take like I've got two friends who want to get involved. Okay. And we did it. Like there is I've always been more of a logistics person and less of a visionary when it comes to any of the things. Like I think like even like the Ender's Game thing, like I've sent thousands of emails during that time, right? But like it was such a like we should do this and trusting that Josh knew what we should do. Um I think it was like a great lesson for me. And then like honestly when you came aboard similarly, I feel like one of the things that was, you know, hard for me, don't cancel me internet, but like realizing like how many people could wind up feeling excluded if we didn't shift our perspective to make sure we could be inclusive. Like our first FlameCon, we didn't think about disabled people because it had an elevator. And then we had a number of folks come and be like, this elevator sucks and it doesn't work and it was painful and it's shocking. And we
Yeah,
moved to a less cool space, but like a better space for everybody to be integrated, an actual hotel that had real people and real policies. And we like I think at your suggestion hired somebody who helped us understand how to make us more inclusive. Like, I didn't
yeah,
know that ramps had to be 45 feet to be like at a right angle so you can get a wheelchair up on your own level. Like, these are just things that, like, you know, having people come aboard who expand your idea of what you can do to bring people together and trusting those was massive. And like, the first person to do that for me was Josh, who was just like, the existence of this is important enough for us to spend time on. And
yeah.
like I rode that wave.
Mm.
And
um
I'll just say, like, even today, I think what's so important and what gives me truly what gives me life is seeing new people come aboard. And I explain the, like, okay, there's a lot of debate on minutia that you are probably never going to have thought about it, and it might be a little boring. And then people are like, no, let me stop you right there. I also love spreadsheets. And I'm like, okay, great. Do you like placing phone calls to mean vendors? Because you're going to do that. And that's, but the seeing the excitement that people have for the process, not just I'm going to show up at the party because that's the fun thing. Like that to me is the spirit of community organizing, right? And the spirit, and I want to thank both of you for creating that early environment where we are learning, we are making mistakes. I remember literally one year we published a piece on the website that was like mea culpa, and it was literally just being like, "Hey guys, we learned a really hard lesson about how we conduct the event. Sorry, and also like I want to thank the community that we've built, not just the people who are organizing, but the people who attend for giving us the grace to mess up, make a mistake, and come back and fix it.
Yeah.
Because we've definitely seen other groups, other events, not have the longevity or make a big mistake that people aren't willing to let slip.
So you've been talking about me while I'm gone.
I was talking about John. I was saying I miss John.
Yeah,
I
I mean, I was gonna say, yeah, since okay, so the three of us are back. Talking about those early days, I think about not being as a person who wasn't the first on, but being one of those early folks. I just can't think of Geeks Out being what it is without John. Uh, John was an OG Geeks Outer. And it's been 2 years since he's gone, and his presence is still felt, which feels great. And honestly, like one of the things that I really appreciate is I still meet people now that I've never met before that are like, "Oh, you're with Geeks Out. You must have known John," and then they'll share a memory of like, yeah, maybe John yelling at them, or being really stressed but pulling off a like sickening event as though it was absolutely nothing. Why was he even stressing? But every time I hear a story like that, it's like he's still here because there's this little piece of him that like I did not know, and then I get to experience it in that moment.
You could give that man like $6 and like a Diet Coke, and you would have like 15 drag queens performing in the basement of some kind of fire trap that like was a thrilling event through and through and had multiple drink specials. And like I I will never, like, the first time he threw something, it was just so magical. And then when we had like an actual budget for like real things to happen, like it was wild to be like, oh, like you are, there's performances, there's a run book, there's a plan, like, and you would say things to him like, oh, might this be a problem? And he'd be like, no, don't worry about it. Like John was the epitome of like, I've got a guy to me, like a phone call. He
Yeah, I don't know
it
how
was
he did
great.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Year two negotiating FlameCon, when he like actually read the contract and like made them change six things to like get our price down, was one of just like, it was like, who is this businessman? Because I mostly know you from like
Hmm.
encouraging me to stay out. Like I mostly know you. I like the trick that the
Yeah.
greatest trick that John would pull is be like, let's just have one drink. And he would convince you that it was going to
Okay.
be one drink. And then you would be at like 3 a.m., like waking up on like a bus going to Utah. And he'd be like, oh, don't worry about it. I've got plane tickets back. You're like, I don't, we said one drink. He's like, this is still technically one drink.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. He
I,
was wonderful. John was so fun to work with because he, as a nightlife guy, like he'd already, like we'd been doing events for a little while with the org, and he'd taken note, and like we'd kind of, I think we met, and he didn't quite hop on board immediately, but like he came to an event, and like he was around a little bit, and like he clearly saw that we he saw what we were trying to do, and could do it so much better somehow because he'd been worked at bars, eh, part of nightlife stuff, and new performers and new bartenders and managers. and that opened a lot of doors for us and really let our
I don't
monthly
think.
convention kind of
I think for like 2 years,
level
I
up.
never saw him pay for a drink. He would show up and know every
Yeah.
person at that bar.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no, um, like, uh, he was also like, there's a kind of New Yorker who is maybe the meanest person you've ever met in one instance while doing the nicest thing that you've ever seen happen, in like a way where like he would be stressed out, he'd have 17 things he was handling, he would notice you were sad and he'd be like, what's wrong? And you'd be like, oh, this is wrong. And he'd be like, don't worry about it. And then in your hand you have like a drumstick and like a whiskey shot. You'd be like, how did this happen? You'd be like, shh, it's fine, here's the show. Like, it's so fast with his kindness and so like on point. I mean, truly an incredible, one of a kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. We
Um,
were lucky to have him.
Yeah.
yeah. Honestly, I think it is the real miracle is finding like 8 queers in their late 20s and early 30s who you could hand $10,000 to and they didn't blow it on stupid shit, but they actually made a real event.
I
We're
the
all cheap, is what I'm saying, and I think it has served us well.
okay. I do appreciate that one thing that you, Josh, and I all had in common is that like when we would fly out to other conventions, like when we started doing that, the rigmarole that we would go through to spend $0 would be unhinged now, right? Like it would
Yeah.
be like, okay, we're gonna sleep 5 to a room in the worst part of town that you've ever been in, and we're gonna like you just if you run from that hotel and don't take public transit or a cab, you can get there. And then you take a little box of money that we would bring back, like a bunch of ones. And I remember one time, Nick, you were like, hey, can I not be the person going through this airport carrying
Yeah.
like $4,000 in cash so I don't have to answer that as a non-white member of this org? And I was like, oh yeah, let me just put that into my bag.
And then the conversation bubbled up to like, oh, maybe it's bad that we just carry around all that cash and then we don't deposit it for 2 weeks.
I
Mm.
I had in my backpack for a solid like 6 days $5,000 from one of our events that I had like put in there at the end of the night, secured, and then forgot about until I like went through my bag and was like, I am thank you. I don't live in New York, everybody listening to this. You can't mug me. But like at the time, just like so lucky that like I hadn't misplaced my bag in the meantime and like also hadn't been held up as I like went back on the subway at 2 a.m. multiple times in the week.
You know, we've learned, we've grown
Oh, have you guys changed your policy on t-shirts?
on
Because
t-shirt
the
ideas.
one thing that I miss from like the OG of the OGs was the period of time when you had joined us, but it was still you hadn't risen to full power yet, and we would just pitch t-shirt ideas at you until you said, "Is there a joke?" Because it was like 4 a.m. or like whatever, and we were all tired. And then at some point, we would convince ourselves that like the funniest thing in the world would be to put like the word schmoo on a t-shirt with like a hand, like a hand and like a picture of like undies. And then you went, okay, you guys, it's joke, joke.
I mean, we still do that. There's still a lot of in honestly, my favorite part of going to conventions is the part where after the show we sit around for 2 hours and we come up with the worst ideas ever. We're like, wouldn't it be great if? And then somebody pitches something that's just not. But you know what? Part of the process.
The
So now
punch
that
drunk
we're
feeling of being exhausted and hanging out with friends after like and like that high of like I've
Yeah.
accomplished something. I don't have to lift any more heavy objects. Like that feeling of relief is when people are their funniest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And our scene is just such a fun, creative space. It's
yeah.
full of fun, silly, imaginative people who
No,
care
and the
about
kind of
stuff.
person,
And it's like,
like,
it's the best thing to hang out after cons, to sit around and talk about all the silly things you saw and thought about. with
Oh my
Geeks Out
gosh.
people. I don't know. It was some of the funnest times ever.
I
Even
think
if we were
also
sitting inside through a hotel room.
the kind of person who wants to, for free, donate their time to make the world a better place for strangers is generally a person who's interesting and exciting. And I feel like, especially when you're dealing with geeks who are like real excited to talk about their interest and get around, like that's what made those initial events so exciting. Is like you're just constantly meeting folks who wanted to talk about their interest in a room where talking about your interest wasn't shunned, and then to get to talk about your interest and include your whole self in that was great. Because like I remember the first time you have a conversation with someone, you're like, every superhero should be bisexual because it's more interesting storytelling. And you say that to a group of straight people, and they're like, no, that's
Taken
dumb.
aback.
Captain America is obviously straight. And you're like, I've never met a gayer person than Captain America. Like, and then you go to a Geeks Out event, or you know, and you say that, and they're like, actually, several of these heroes should also be asexual. And here's my list. And you're like, oh, I could see that. Like, or like, here are the following five heroes who are absolutely furries, and this is why. And like that yes anding that happens is so joyful, is so cool, that you wind up on like incredibly fun conversations where people just tell you like their favorite comic story or some random like blog that they read about where like they've done something stupid with the characters. And
No, we lost Joey.
you know,
Oh no,
We
Joey.
can only ever
to
have
be in
two
a
of you. Are
room
you the same person? We can only
where
have two of
you're
you in the room
surrounded
together at the same
by
time.
It's been
people
suspected
who
before.
accept
Yeah.
you like right off the bat,
I
there's
was
nothing
having a
hidden.
thought that was going on that, but it left me in a moment. Sorry.
Oh, Joey, you're back.
Hey,
So, okay, closing thought. What is your favorite memory from Geeks Out?
There is this
uh,
joke that came about after an extremely long convention that involves Wonder Woman opening up a hero stand and correcting people's pronunciation of heroes, and then filming a series of commercials that I can't explain here. But it culminated in a John original drawing. Wonder Woman in front of the
Oh my
Titanic
gosh.
eating a hero. That I
yeah.
like.
I,
I love
I,
I love every part of it.
yeah. I feel like, well, the long-standing Wonder Woman joke where she opens a hero stand in the Hall of Justice. Um,
Sorry.
Because
yeah,
Themyscira is obviously in Greece.
yeah, right, having a long-running joke with people that you're working on hard stuff with that just is just absolutely stupid, but just keeps going for years and years. Um, is a really special thing that we all, like. They, I, yeah, I'd say like one of my favorite things about Geeks Out was our terrible in jokes that were like they just kept us alive. And I have a portrait of Wonder Woman eating a hero on my wall as well. In the background of her picture, there's the Hindenburg blowing up. It was
I don't have
drawn.
one.
It was
You're
drawn
still
by Nick
president,
Winter.
baby.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
it was
okay.
my leaving the orgs gift the way that Joey's was his. Um, and
Yours will be in front of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, which was
My
your
personal
contribution.
request.
yeah,
Well,
No,
I
my specific favorite memory is the night that we were in DC, and you had for 4 years at that point refused to find that joke funny as a personal vendetta. And you came out holding a little goblet of wine, and you said, "Okay, I've got something to contribute to this. Can her plane time travel?" And I started laughing so hard, I kept crying. And Josh or Dave was like, yes, that plane can absolutely time travel. And then you went on a series of insane jaunts from there, uh, that you had been building up to for, I think, a year of not finding that joke funny. And it was like a beautiful, beautiful moment for me of realizing that you were ready to run this organization, as you had found the dumbest thing in the world extremely funny. It's like, well, we've ruined your brain enough to carry on this legacy.
Well, I want to say, and I think I said this to you both a couple of years ago, but I'm incredibly grateful for this group that you created, because it has brought me, like, truly, like, the truest meaning of the word, chosen family. Like, people who have been here in the hardest times, friends, lovers, everything in between. And now I'm really thankful that you showed me what it's like to get in a room and, like, be messy, but, like, point a gay at a problem, and then, like, make something really amazing. So thanks, guys.
I love that so much. Like, to me,
Yeah.
the fact that we could do this crazy org together, there was just we had ideas together and we had momentum and we were having a good time and it grew. And the fact that we could step away and have it continue and be stronger and different with new people and do new things, like, I, it's so wonderful to know that it's happening out there and that the org keeps going through, doing new things and working with new people. And um, to me, that's one of the coolest things. That I'm so proud that we were part of something that continues, that still means stuff to people, that still brings positivity to people's day. And we are, I check on it once in a while, or like I'm on the email list and I go to the website and and we talk backstage, but like it it's cool knowing that things are still happening and that um, Geeks Out is part of the future.
Yeah. It is a real true joy to have made good friends with both of you. And you know, unexpected in so many ways, but like that it continues, that it exists. I could not have envisioned that in year one or year two. Like, and now it just feels like, oh, it's there and it's good and people like it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. This has been a great conversation, and I look forward to having more of these conversations offline, personally, where I will pitch you more Wonder Woman jokes. But when you least expect.
Heroes.